deaf millionaire was dining alone. Until the poor cleaner's black baby arrived and did the impossible. "Get that child off my property now, or I'll call the police," shouted Victoria Hartwell, director of the real estate consortium, pointing her manicured finger at the 8-month-old baby crawling across the marble floor of the penthouse. David Sterling watched the scene in absolute silence. At 45, the millionaire had lost his hearing at age 12, but he could read lips perfectly. And what he saw on those hate-filled lips filled him with a cold rage he hadn't felt in a long time. Isabella, the 28-year-old cleaning lady, trembled as she picked up her son. "Please, ma'am, I had no one to leave him with today. The daycare is closed because of the flood and I don't care about your personal problems." Victoria cut her off, turning to David. "Mr. Sterling, I hope you understand that this kind of situation is completely unacceptable in a building of our caliber." David Sterling never imagined that an ordinary Thursday would become the day he would finally see the true face of the people around him. Heir to a real estate fortune, he had built an even greater empire, but had always lived isolated in his silent world. Few people knew that behind that disability was a strategic mind that had already destroyed competitors much smarter than Victoria. The baby, oblivious to the tension, smiled and reached out his little arms to David, who instinctively bent down to pick him up. The boy touched his face with curiosity, without fear, without prejudice, only with the purity of someone who has not yet learned to hate. "Put that child down," Victoria yelled, completely losing her composure. "Don't you understand? They're taking advantage of your disability. That woman brought the child here on purpose to manipulate you." David stood up slowly, still holding the baby, and for the first time in years turned on the hearing aid he always carried in his pocket. The world regained its sounds, Isabella's heavy breathing, the noise of the air conditioner, and especially Victoria's venomous voice. Isabella lowered her head, ashamed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. I'll leave right now. It won't happen again." But David didn't answer her. His eyes were fixed on Victoria, who smiled with satisfaction, thinking she had solved the problem. What she didn't know was that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. "Isabella," David said calmly, "you can take the baby to the living room. He can play there while you finish your work." Victoria turned pale. "David, you can't be serious. That's absurd." As Isabella left, relieved with her son, David turned to Victoria with a smile she had never seen before. It was the smile of someone who had just found the perfect reason to use all the power he had accumulated over decades. "Victoria," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "I think we need to talk about the future of this partnership." What Victoria had no idea was that David Sterling had recorded the entire conversation. And that recording would be just the first step in a plan she could never have imagined. If you're enjoying this story of how a moment of prejudice would turn into the most spectacular downfall anyone has ever witnessed, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will show that underestimating someone's intelligence can cost much more than your reputation. Victoria Hartwell couldn't sleep that night. The image of David Sterling holding that black baby bothered her in a way she couldn't explain. In 15 years as director of the consortium, she had built her reputation by maintaining high standards, a euphemism that everyone understood perfectly well. The next morning, Victoria called an emergency meeting with the other owners of the building. The 30th floor conference room was filled with worried faces when she began to speak. "Gentlemen, we have a problem. David Sterling is allowing the cleaning crew to bring children into the building. This is unacceptable and could set a dangerous precedent." Robert Mitchell, owner of a chain of restaurants, frowned. "Victoria, are you sure this is really a problem? David has always been very reserved." "That's exactly why I'm concerned." Victoria cut in, slamming her hand on the table. "He's disabled, Robert. Vulnerable. This woman is clearly taking advantage of the situation. Today it's a baby, tomorrow it will be the whole family moving into his apartment." What Victoria didn't know was that David Sterling wasn't just a privileged heir who had been lucky in business. At age 12, when he lost his hearing in a car accident that also killed his parents, David was raised by his grandfather, an immigrant who had built his real estate empire from scratch by working 18 hours a day. "Boy," his grandfather used to say, "the world will try to diminish you because of your disability. But I'm going to teach you something they'll never expect: how to use silence to your advantage. When people think you're not listening, they reveal who they really are." For years, David perfected the art of lip reading, body language, and above all, observation. He knew exactly who the people around him were long before they revealed themselves completely. And Victoria Hartwell was about to discover how dangerous it was to underestimate someone who had spent decades observing and planning in silence. While Victoria was plotting, David was in his private office reviewing contracts. Isabella cleaned quietly in the background, with the baby sleeping in a makeshift stroller. David had insisted that she bring the child whenever she needed to. "Mr. Sterling," Isabella said hesitantly, "I don't want to cause you any trouble. If Mrs. Victoria—" David raised his hand, interrupting her. "Isabella, tell me something. How long have you been working cleaning commercial buildings?" "5 years, sir. Since James was born, I've needed flexible hours to take care of him." "And have you been in similar situations before? People treating you badly because of your son?" Isabella lowered her eyes. "Many times, sir. Some people, they look at us and already decide who we are, you know? As if I couldn't be a good mother and a good employee at the same time." David nodded slowly. He knew that feeling of being judged before he even had a chance to prove himself. The difference was that he had turned that experience into a silent and lethal weapon. "Isabella, do you have family here in town?" "No, sir. Just the two of us. James's father's family. They didn't approve when they found out I was pregnant. They said I was trying to trap their son. He disappeared before James was born." David felt a cold anger grow inside him. Another person abandoned by those who should have protected her. Another situation where prejudice and selfishness destroyed innocent lives. At that moment, his phone rang. It was Victoria. "David, I need to talk to you urgently. It's about the delicate situation we discussed yesterday." "What situation, Victoria?" "The cleaning lady and the child, David. The other owners are concerned. Perhaps it would be best if we found a more appropriate solution to this situation." David looked at Isabella, who pretended not to be listening but was clearly tense. "Victoria, what kind of solution are you suggesting?" "Well, there are more professional cleaning companies. No family complications. I can provide some recommendations." "I see," David replied, his voice dangerously calm. "And why do you think that would be better?" Victoria hesitated for a second, realizing she might be treading on dangerous ground. "David, you're an intelligent man. Surely you understand that there are standards to be maintained. This building represents a certain level of society." "Oh, I understand perfectly, Victoria. Standards." What Victoria didn't realize was that every word was being recorded. David had learned long ago that the most dangerous people were those who expressed their prejudice with polite smiles and carefully chosen words. After hanging up, David turned to Isabella. "Isabella, do you trust me?" She nodded, confused by the question. "Good. Because I have a proposal for you. How about I hire you directly, as my personal assistant? It would be a better salary, fixed hours, and paid daycare for James." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Sterling, I don't know what to say. You can start tomorrow. You'll need some basic office training, but I'm sure you'll learn quickly." What Isabella didn't know was that this promotion wasn't just a gesture of kindness. It was the first move in a chess game that David Sterling had begun playing the moment he saw Victoria Hartwell's true colors. And people like Victoria always underestimated the intelligence of those they considered inferior, whether due to disability, race, or social class. As Isabella left the office beaming with her new opportunity, David opened his laptop and began researching. Victoria Hartwell, he discovered, had an interesting history. The daughter of a traditional family that had lost its fortune 2 generations ago, she had married a successful real estate broker and used his money to buy her apartment in the building. Even more interesting, she was 3 months behind on her condo fees. David smiled. It was striking how financially insecure people always seemed to be the cruelest to those they considered below them. As if cruelty could mask their own vulnerability. Each new humiliation Victoria tried to impose only fueled something inside David that she couldn't see, a silent strength being nourished by the very injustice she tried to normalize. What that privileged woman didn't know was that each act of contempt was writing her own sentence of defeat, and that underestimating the intelligence of someone who had turned silence into his greatest weapon would be the biggest mistake of her life. 3 weeks after Isabella's promotion, David Sterling was in his private office when he received a call he had been waiting for. On the other end of the line, Marcus Thompson, one of the most respected private investigators on the East Coast, had some interesting news. David, you were right about Victoria Hartwell. Her situation is much worse than we imagined. David adjusted his hearing aid and leaned back in his chair. Tell me everything, Marcus. She's not just 3 months behind on her condo payments. I found out she owes $2.3 million to loan sharks connected to underground casinos. Her husband, Robert Hartwell, lost everything betting on risky investments and illegal gambling. They're desperate, David. That's why she's so aggressive about maintaining the building's standard. David smiled coldly. People who were financially desperate were always the cruelest to those they considered vulnerable. It was a pathetic but predictable psychological compensation. And there's more, Marcus continued. Victoria has been using her position as director of the consortium to inflate maintenance contracts and pocket the difference. I have evidence of at least 12 fraudulent transactions in the last 2 years. Excellent work, Marcus. Keep everything in a safe place. We'll need it soon. While David planned his next steps, Victoria Hartwell intensified her campaign of persecution. She had discovered that Isabella now worked directly for David, and that made her furious. How could a black cleaning lady have been promoted to personal assistant? It was a direct insult to the natural order of things, at least in Victoria's twisted mind. At the condo meeting that Thursday, Victoria decided to escalate the conflict. The room was full of owners when she stood up to speak. Gentlemen, I need to address an urgent security issue. We have a situation where employees are bringing outside elements into the building. Children without proper supervision, people who have not undergone background checks. Robert Mitchell frowned. Victoria, what exactly are you talking about? I'm talking about Mr. David Sterling allowing his assistant to bring a child into the building on a daily basis. This sets a dangerous precedent and could compromise our security. David, who was present at the meeting, remained silent, watching. Victoria had no idea that every word was being recorded by a device hidden in her purse. The baby is 8 months old, Victoria, said Margaret Foster, one of the few owners David respected. What kind of security threat could a child that age pose? Victoria was visibly irritated by the interruption. It's not about the child's age, Margaret. It's about standards. It's about maintaining the integrity of this building. If we start making exceptions, where does it end? David finally stood up. Victoria, can I ask you a question? What exactly is your problem with Isabella and her son? The direct question caught Victoria off guard. For a moment, she hesitated, realizing she was treading on dangerous ground. But her arrogance won out over caution. My problem, David, is that you're being manipulated. This woman is taking advantage of your condition to gain undue advantages. And now she has complete access to your personal life, your home, your assets. Doesn't that seem suspicious to you? The silence in the room was absolute. Even those who secretly agreed with Victoria were uncomfortable with the bluntness of the statement. David smiled, a smile that made several of those present feel uneasy. My condition? Are you referring to my deafness? I didn't say that. You did, Victoria. And it was recorded. David took his cell phone out of his pocket. In fact, this entire conversation is being recorded, just like all the other conversations we've had on this subject. Victoria turned pale. You can't record people without their consent. I can when I'm protecting myself and my employees from discrimination and harassment. It's completely legal to record conversations I'm involved in. That's when David revealed his trump card. Speaking of legal issues, Victoria, would you like to explain to the other owners why you haven't paid your condo fees in 3 months? The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Victoria turned pale. How dare you? This is an invasion of privacy. It's public information from the consortium. Just as public as the 12 fraudulent transactions you approved in the last 2 years, inflating contracts to pocket the difference. David walked over to the projector and connected his laptop. Gentlemen, I would like to present some interesting documents that have come to my attention. The first image showed bank statements proving Victoria's late payments. The second showed maintenance contracts with inflated amounts. The third showed suspicious transfers to her personal accounts. "David, where did you get this?" Victoria shouted, completely losing her composure. "I have my resources, Victoria. And unlike you, I use those resources legally and ethically." Margaret Foster stood up, clearly outraged. "Victoria, is this true? Did you steal money from our condominium?" I can explain." "No need to explain," David interrupted calmly. "The lawyers will do that for you. We filed criminal charges this morning." Victoria looked around the room, searching for some support, some friendly face. She found none. The same owners who had once silently agreed with her prejudices now looked at her with disgust and contempt. "You don't understand," she said desperately. "I was protecting this place. Maintaining our standards. Preventing that kind of people." "What kind of people, Victoria?" David asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Finish the sentence." Victoria realized the trap, but it was too late. She had revealed her true nature to everyone present, and there was no turning back. Robert Mitchell shook his head in disgust. "Victoria, consider yourself relieved of your position as director, effective immediately. And I suggest you find a good lawyer." As Victoria left the room in disgrace, David watched calmly. Part 1 of the plan was complete. But he knew that people like Victoria never gave up easily when cornered. She would try to retaliate, try to cause more damage. And that was exactly what made David's next steps not only necessary but completely justified. That night, as Isabella put little James to sleep in the makeshift crib in David's office, she looked at her boss with admiration and concern. "Mr. Sterling, thank you for defending me today. But aren't you worried that she'll try to get revenge somehow?" David adjusted his hearing aid and smiled. "Isabella, have you ever seen a wounded predator? They become more dangerous, but also more careless. And careless people make mistakes." Isabella didn't fully understand what he meant, but there was something in David's gaze that reassured her. Something that said he was several steps ahead of anything Victoria might try. What neither of them knew was that Victoria, humiliated and desperate, was already planning one last act of cruelty that would reveal exactly how far she was willing to go to keep her world of privilege intact. Under the weight of all that public humiliation, her next actions would no longer be about disguised prejudice. They would be about pure, destructive revenge against a man who had dared to challenge her using the very intelligence she had always underestimated, proving that desperate people, when cornered, are capable of crossing lines they never imagined possible. Victoria Hartwell could not accept the humiliation. 3 days after the disastrous meeting, she sat in her Mercedes-Benz parked in front of David's building, watching Isabella enter with baby James in her arms. Anger burned in her chest like acid. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she never thought she would use. "Child Protective Services? I would like to make an anonymous report of child neglect." The voice on the other end was professional. "Can you give me the details, ma'am? There is a child being exposed to dangerous situations. The mother takes her to inappropriate environments, leaves her alone with strangers." Victoria fabricated an elaborate story, using her social status to lend credibility to the lies. The next morning, Isabella was in David's apartment organizing documents when the doorbell rang. 2 social workers introduced themselves, showing a court order. "Ms. Williams, we have received a report of inadequate care of your son. We need to conduct an inspection." Isabella turned pale. But I don't understand. James is always with me, he is well cared for." David appeared at the door, having sensed the tension through the vibrations in the floor. When he saw the official uniforms and Isabella's desperate face, he immediately understood what was happening. "Excuse me," he addressed the social workers, "I'm David Sterling, owner of this residence. May I ask what exactly is the nature of this complaint?" The older social worker explained the allegations: neglect, exposure to risks, unsuitable environment for a child. Each word was like a stab in the heart for Isabella, who held James tightly, fearing they would try to take him away. "Interesting," David said calmly, turning on his hearing aid. "And this complaint was anonymous?" "Yes, sir. But we are obligated to investigate all complaints we receive." David nodded. "Of course. Conduct whatever inspection you need to. But I'd like to show you a few things first." He went to his laptop and opened a series of files. "Ladies, Would you like to hear the recording of the person who made this complaint? The social workers looked at each other, confused. Sir, the complaint was anonymous. Ah, but you don't know who you're dealing with. David smiled coldly and pressed play. Victoria Hartwell's unmistakable voice filled the room. There is a child being exposed to dangerous situations. The mother takes her to inappropriate environments, leaves her alone with strangers. How did you get this? The younger social worker asked, shocked. I have a very advanced security system. All calls made from or to this building are automatically recorded for security reasons. It's completely legal, and all residents are informed. David continued, but that's just the beginning. Victoria Hartwell, the woman who made this report, was removed from her position as director of the consortium 3 days ago for fraud. She stole over $400,000 from residents over the past 2 years. He showed her the supporting documents. She also has $2.3 million in debts to loan sharks and is facing criminal charges for embezzlement. This complaint is clearly retaliation against me for exposing her. Isabella looked at David with growing admiration and relief. He had protected not only her, but her son, from a cruel and calculated trap. The older social worker shook her head in disgust. Mr. Sterling, we are very sorry for this inconvenience. We will close this case immediately and report the false complaint to the appropriate authorities. But David wasn't finished. Actually, ladies, I would like to make a real complaint. Victoria Hartwell has just used the child protection system as a personal weapon, wasting public resources and causing emotional trauma to an innocent family. Isn't that a crime? After the social workers left, David turned to Isabella, who was crying with relief. How did you know she would do that? Because I know people like Victoria. When they feel cornered, they always attack what they consider most vulnerable. She wanted to hurt you through James. David picked up the phone. But now she's committed a federal crime. False reporting to protective services is a serious crime. At that very moment, Victoria was at home when the doorbell rang. It was 2 FBI agents. Victoria Hartwell, you are under arrest for making false reports to Child Protective Services, obstruction of justice, and misuse of federal resources. As they handcuffed her, Victoria shouted, "You don't understand. I was protecting a child. That deaf man is being manipulated." "Ma'am," said the agent, "we have complete recordings of your calls. There is no evidence of child neglect, but there is clear evidence that you fabricated a report out of personal revenge." In the police car, Victoria finally understood the extent of her defeat. David Sterling wasn't just some isolated millionaire she could manipulate. He was a strategist who had anticipated her every move, setting legal traps at every turn. That evening, David was having dinner with Isabella and James when he received a call from his lawyer. "David, I have news. Victoria Hartwell has been formally charged with 3 federal crimes. With her history of fraud in the condominium, she is facing 8 to 15 years in prison." Isabella looked at David with deep gratitude. "Mr. Sterling, how can I thank you? You saved my family." "You don't have to thank me for doing the right thing, Isabella. Justice is not a favor, it's an obligation." David watched James playing happily in his stroller, completely oblivious to the drama that had unfolded around him. An innocent child had been used as a weapon by a desperate and cruel woman, but now he was safe. The irony was that Victoria, in her final attempt to destroy Isabella's life using the very system that was supposed to protect children, had sealed her own fate in a permanent and devastating way. That same night, the story leaked to the local newspapers. Luxury condominium manager arrested for fraud and false reporting. Victoria's reputation was publicly destroyed, her high society friends abandoned her, and her husband filed for divorce to try to save what remained of his own assets. David Sterling had turned every act of cruelty Victoria had committed against herself, using the very law she had tried to pervert. While Victoria faced the reality of federal prison, David, Isabella, and James represented something she would never understand: that dignity, intelligence, and compassion always triumph over prejudice, no matter how powerful it may seem. But the real lesson was yet to come, because in the days that followed, something happened that would show that when you protect a family with genuine love, the universe has a very special way of repaying that kindness, creating an ending that even David himself could not have predicted when it all began with a baby smiling at a lonely man. 6 months later, David Sterling watched from his office window as Isabella organized documents at her new desk. She was now officially his executive assistant, with an executive salary and all the benefits that came with the position. James played happily in the corporate nursery that David had set up especially for him. The transformation had been complete. Isabella was studying business administration at night, paid for by the company, while James attended the best daycare in town. The mule's humble apartment had been traded for a comfortable house in a safe neighborhood. Victoria Hartwell, on the other hand, faced a very different reality. Sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, false reporting, and obstruction of justice, she had lost literally everything. Her luxury apartment was auctioned off to pay her debts, her husband filed for divorce, and her high society friends abandoned her completely. During the trial, the judge had been particularly harsh. Ms. Hartwell, using the child protection system as a personal weapon against an innocent family is one of the most despicable crimes I have ever witnessed in this court. David received a call from his lawyer that afternoon. David, I just heard. Victoria tried to appeal the sentence, claiming that you manipulated her into committing the crimes. The judge rejected it in 5 minutes, calling the claim pathetic and baseless. Isabella looked at David gratefully. Mr. Sterling. David, thank you for believing in us when no one else did. Isabella, you taught me something important. That family isn't about blood, but about choice. You chose me when I was alone, and I chose you back. James, now 14 months old, took his first steps that day, walking straight to David, who picked him up with tears in his eyes. The irony was perfect. Victoria had tried to destroy a family out of prejudice and ended up creating an even stronger family through her own cruelty. David Sterling had learned that the best revenge is not to destroy those who try to harm you. It is to build something so beautiful and true that the evil of others becomes irrelevant in the face of the power of genuine love. If this story of how prejudice can become the catalyst for its own destruction has touched you, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that when we protect those we love with courage and intelligence, the universe always finds a way to reward kindness in ways we never imagined possible.